Welcome to Ecologic for the month of April. Beautiful time of the year. The weather's staying cool. The guests on tonight's program is Amber Robinson and Heather Finley, both representing the Bayou-Vermilion Preservation Association. They had a recent conference that was well attended, that dealt with many issues important to the Bayou-Vermilion. So Amber and Heather's going to share with us what y'all perceive as the issues on the Vermilion and how they might be solved.
Well, I'll start off, I guess, by talking a little bit about Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association, if that's okay, Mr.
Sure,
Harold.
absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having us. We're real happy to be here. So Bayou Vermilion Preservation Association started back in 2013, and it was an idea that was brought out during a Lafayette Garden Club meeting, right, Heather? And folks in attendance were interested in improving the aquatic habitat along the Vermilion, and two folks named Jan and Charlie Wyatt were kind of spearheading the whole effort. And so it's been a little over 10 years now, I guess, since BVPA got going. And with the mission of just spreading awareness and education about how we can enjoy and preserve Bayou Vermilion and the Vermilion River. So we've been working on that for a while now, I think.
Right. And Harold, I know you well know it because one of our charter members was Sarah Scheffler. And so Harold's been involved for as long as we've been involved. He's been involved. But I think one of our, as you say, our primary really focus is to educate people about the river, and we're really interested in promoting recreation on the river, and kind of with the idea that if you spend time on the river, if you get out there in a kayak, or if you picnic on the banks someplace, you're going to care about it.
Right. Yeah, and figuring out ways, I think, because I believe that there's been a loss of that connection. If I were to come up with one issue that I can think of right off the top, it's just people have forgotten that we have this river flowing through our city.
And to go down the river in a boat gives you an entirely different perspective.
Right.
Definitely.
The beauty of the river, and
Yes.
it's
And in large part, water's a huge part of our culture,
Yes.
and reminding people through some of the events that I think we're able to host, but also reminding people to recreate along it or
Sure.
in it kind of helps reconnect them in a way that maybe they've forgotten. So I think that's one of my
It's a
big
beautiful-
takeaways.
It's a beautiful waterway to paddle a kayak or canoe. It's gorgeous. I mean,
The
it's
native
70
trees.
miles long, and it starts up there at Orneville. It's one of the only out branches of the Bayou Teche.
Right.
And
Right, and it's actually quite interesting. It's pretty rural, really, until you get right by the
Laughlin.
airport.
yes,
And this area has been, I mean, the history is interesting. There's some old Indian middens along the banks
I
that
can
are,
tell you about them.
I know. That's how I know they're there.
We grew up at Intercoastal City, and there were three enormous Indian mounds. We call them the Pyramid Mounds, where the Bayou Vermilion hit the bay. They were on the left side, and the middle one was the largest, but they were 30 or 40 feet high. They had no vegetation. They were all shells. And,
Wow.
and they're beautiful to go up and play on them. Then when you got up on the top, in that marsh country, if you're up 30 or 40 feet,
You could see it,
you're
you could
way
see for
up, you know.
miles.
There's a sad story. There were three mounds that were taken out at about the same time, and Dr. Kibbe at UL was trying his best to save them. One of them is where Oakmont Country Club is.
Oh,
And right across the bay from there, where the runway is, there were two more. And had they moved the runway about 200 feet, they could have saved both of them.
wow.
But they took them out.
as you
On this
say,
program about, I guess it must have been 20 years ago, we were talking about the volume of Vermilion. And we talked about the Indian Mound, where Oakmont was. As kids, we'd hunt rabbits there. It was on the top of the Coteau Ridge, and it was up about 30 feet. So it was a large mound. It was flat across the top. It was all full of black bears and rabbits. And
So Harold, the water must have been pretty clear then. If
I don't
there's
know.
you
Of course,
think about,
it was very much tidal, and when the water would go down, the salinity would come up. You'd have shrimp and crabs. We'd
Yeah.
catch crabs in the bayou right at Oakmont.
Wow.
You know, when it started going up and down with the tide, the salinity would back up, which they didn't want, but it would get very clear. And so, but finished this program about the mound at the Oakmont Country Club. We were talking about it, and a guy from Carriacrone calls in, and he says, I was driving the bulldozer that knocked the mound down.
Oh, no.
And he says, I went about 10 feet and I knew we were doing the wrong thing. He says the skulls and the skeletons were being pushed aside.
oh, wow.
This was a burial mound.
Not a midden, but a
And
burial
he says,
mound.
every day I think about how wrong this was to do. He says, it was like me pushing my dozer through the graveyard at Carriacrone.
Yep, yep.
Wow.
Wow, I did not realize that.
Right.
Because I was gonna ask.
He didn't give
you-
his name, you know,
I
but he
wouldn't,
didn't have
no.
to. But how he knew it was the wrong thing to do.
So the reason I'm asking, we actually are gonna be hosting an evening with Malcolm Vidrine. Dr. Vidrine is a professor, he's a longtime conservationist, he's an author, and he and Charles Allen won the James Williams River Prize from the Center for Louisiana Studies for their work on the Cajun Prairie. And Malcolm also recently won the Carolyn Dorman Conservation Prize
Wow,
this year.
what an honor.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You know, this is a year clearly where his work is being appreciated. And so we're hosting an evening with him. And one of the things that he talks about, not specifically about the Vermilion or even the Teche, but just in South Louisiana, is how degraded water quality is. And he's linking that to post-European settlement use, agricultural and industrial uses of the bayou. So I'm not talking about soluble pollutants, he's just talking about silt.
Sediment. Yeah.
Sediment silt, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you see, sediment, the Bayou Teche from Orneville to the Keystone Dam has no flow. The dam, the amount of water going over the dam at Keystone is only about 25% of what goes down to Vermilion. Now, the Vermilion has about 1.5 mile current when they pump, and it pretty much maintains, which is enough to carry some sediment, but it can't carry it very far.
It's
It
about
It lands
little
in Lafayette.
300 cubic feet per second, something like that. when
Well, they have to keep 300 cubic feet per second over the dam, which is roughly 3 inches. That amount of flow puts right at 1,000 cubic feet per second down to Vermilion.
Okay.
And 300 CFS is not enough to carry sediment, but 1,000 is going down to Vermilion. It's coming down to Ruth and to Vermilion both. And of course, the Teche is 10 foot higher than the Vermilion, roughly. That's what the dam height is. So that, of course, one of the reasons probably why we flooded is the Vermilion can't carry, the water. It doesn't have the channel capacity.
Right.
And, generally, the biggest pollution problem, of course, is sewage.
Yeah.
And that's a health issue. we knew it was a big health issue in the late 70s. They had a cholera outbreak. It was totally on the Vermilion.
So,
And New England medical group came and investigated the causes, how people got it. And often there was people handling crabs, for instance. They would catch crabs in the bay at one of the dams, and then they'd put them in an ice chest and bring them home and boil them. And they'd put them back in the same ice chest to keep them hot.
not a good idea.
And they would
yeah.
recontaminate them.
Wow.
And so, but during that time, Lafayette was producing about 12 million gallons a day of sewage. And our 4 plants could only handle 7. So they never overload them. They can't overload them, because if you overload them, then everything is polluted. So they were well run, but we didn't have the capacity. So we needed to build more capacity. And Douglas Shops was involved. And it was justified because the waterborne disease rate in Lafayette per million was very high. And that's just not, the Atlanta Disease Control Center had those numbers. The waterborne disease rate for Louisiana was half of the national average. And the waterborne disease rate for Lafayette Parish and Vermilion Parish was 6 times the national average.
Oh my.
With hepatitis, Georgia, cholera was included, And
When was that
so
again? How
this
long
was-
ago?
This was in the middle, 83, 84.
Oh wow.
And of course, the cholera, devastated the seafood business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what year, I want to say, I think the pumps at Krotz Springs went online in 78, is that
85,
right? In 85?
85, yeah.
Okay. Because, and Amber can tell you more about this than I do, but right now, BVPA, the Lafayette Consolidated Government Environmental Section, and mostly, I guess, the Tesh Vermilion
Freshwater, Tesh Vermilion Freshwater District.
Right. So we're doing monthly sampling.
And we have been since 2014. Now the parameters that we've been collecting since then have varied, and now we're testing fecal and a few other parameters that you have to send off to a lab, but fecal really has improved. It is one of the ones, though, in the sampling, because we're sampling, gosh, over 20 sites now. I don't remember exactly the
So
number.
all the way from
but
the top to
until
Perry.
Right, exactly. Fecal, though, from what they learned whenever they sent some samples off in 2017, consisted mostly of human and
Dog.
domesticated dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that makes sense because there's a lot of, small sewage systems, sewage plants that aren't connected to the big city sewage plants that are kind of grandfathered
38
in.
of them.
Yeah, that are grandfathered in
not-
that haven't
that-
been improved.
Well,
However, I just want to say there's
one
a
of them I
point
know out real well. It has a single offshore unit designed for 50 people, and there's 273 homes hooked into it.
I see.
Now, when we were redesigning the plant for Lafayette, the new plant off of Ambassador, we needed to handle 12 million a day. We had 7, so this new plant was designed to be 7 million, and that gave us 14. And then the plant on West Bayou going to be upgraded for another 2 million. So that would have given us 16 million, and that was to take in those 38 subdivisions immediately around Lafayette, but out of the city limits. Which, by the way, they don't have fire protection either.
now.
No, they don't.
Yeah, I know.
And so, you buy a $700,000 home and you don't have a fire hydrant anywhere around it. So, but anyway.
But I did want to make a point, and I think Amber could, she actually knows the numbers. But one of the things, of course, that we're checking every month is fecal coliform counts. And we generally find they're well below
The threshold, the
They're well
state's
below the-
threshold, yeah.
for, pretty much always for, they call the secondary,
Except when it rains.
well, if it rains heavily, yeah, you're right. But,
Yeah, 'cause you
but
wash
most
all-
of the time, Harold, when we sample, they're below the threshold for primary exposure, which would be swimming.
300 parts per,
Yeah, really. The water quality, the change since the 70s till now, the improvement is just astounding, I think.
oh, from the
It could be
70s,
better.
yeah, I mean, you had.
It could be much better. I'm not
Lafayette
saying
was
it's not.
dumping
but-
7 million gallons a day untreated. And that's not, and there was a cork in that thing. We would be at 12 million a day for all the months except June, July, and August. And they would drop to 8 million a day. And we couldn't figure it out till we finally realized UL wasn't in class.
Oh, wow.
20,000 students weren't there.
It makes a big difference.
Yeah,
They
that
all
does
went
make a
home.
big
Yeah,
difference.
all went home.
Right.
Yeah. Well-
So, but, you know, interesting history of the Vermilion. LSU did a study in 1949 of the Vermilion and its path. And it was important because it's the westernmost track of the Mississippi.
Mhm.
And it didn't go through Southwest Pass. It went through Little Bay and roughly through Belle Isle and towards Freshwater Bayou.
Oh, okay.
And it passed almost straight south, east of Freshwater Bayou.
Okay.
And they tracked it, this was 3 ice ages back. So they tracked it across the continental shelf for almost 100 miles. They were doing borings to verify the presence of the river. And I got the study because they were doing that study and they came across the dredges and barges tearing down the big Indian mounds at the end of the Vermilion.
So they documented that in that
Yes, they
study?
documented, they spent a page blasting the state for allowing that to happen,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, and what would it mean today? I mean, in 1949, we could go to a site like that and what we could learn then was entirely different from what we could learn today. As science has improved, you know,
Right.
we could learn a lot about what was going on.
Right, right. And the imaging, our ability to image, especially
Yeah.
like, underwater,
Oh, yeah.
is just amazing.
Yeah, the
things you
chemistry's
can do.
improved so
I
much.
see
Well, I
that
mean,
at my age. I think it's
DNA and
but-
you
No,
know,
it is, it
Carbon,
definitely
carbon
is.
dating, you know, they can tell how old the shells are, you know, and on and on. But I interviewed the chief of the Attakawa tribe, Mike Amos, his name. He's actually from Beaumont, and he talked about the Vermilion and how one of their first contacts with European, other than the Jesuits, and the Jesuits came and converted them all to Catholicism back in the 16th century. But they encountered a ship, a crew in 1890, and it was, 1690. And there was cartographers, map makers, French, Spanish, that started at the Sabine, and they were moving back east to find fresh water and find out, you know, the lay of the land. They knew a lot about the Gulf east of the Mississippi, but they knew nothing about it to the west.
Right.
So they encountered, this was in November of 1690, and they noticed fires on the bank, so they knew there had to be a human presence in November. So they got the skiffs and came ashore and met the Indians. And, you know, and he says the Indians shared with him the Chafla River, the Vermilion, and the Vermilion was when a lot of the Indians would spend their winters in the marshes and their summers in the mountains of New Mexico. And their path north was the Vermilion. It wasn't the Chafla, which is a
It
big,
was the
powerful river.
Vermilion.
They could go up a small river. And they could go up the Vermilion and go into Catawba and then into Cocodrie all the way to Alexandria
Wow.
and get into Red River where it's much smaller. So he's saying this, I said, wait a minute, Chief, there's a language barrier here. These people cannot learn anything you're talking about from, you know, these Indians did not speak Spanish. He said about 10 years before this team of mapmakers came, 2 Spanish cabin boys washed up on the beach, and the Indians took them in and took care of them.
Oh, wow.
So they served as
They were
the
Interpreters.
interpreter.
Wow.
Oh, what a story.
And one of these guys wrote a book about his 10 years with the Native Americans,
Wow.
you know, around Cameron Parish. And I'd love to get a copy. I want to call Mike Eves to see if I can get that copy.
Right.
But he stressed the importance of the million. It was the path north. It had high ground, had plenty of game, plenty of spots that they were, you know, not harassed by flood water. The banks were high enough that they could stay out of harm's way. So we have thousands and thousands of years of history. We like to think of history as from the Civil War forward, you know, but
It goes
the
way
history here on
back.
the Vermilion goes way, way back. You know,
Right,
you know,
right.
and it's interesting that the oxbows left by that 60,000-year river was the Big Woods in Iberville,
Mm-hmm.
where Palmetto Park is,
Yeah.
and Cypress Isle Swamp.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And that's when you look at the LiDAR, the LiDAR just shows it just beautifully, the track of the river.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, that's something else that's missing. We don't feel connected maybe because we don't understand the history that well. When we hosted our recent river symposium, it was all about education, right? And how we can educate people both in, you know, traditional ways in schools, but also through community engagement and education and outreach out in the community. And we had some folks that came in and talked about various ways of educating people, but in particular, making sure that the children understand the history of our local areas. And because oftentimes the curriculums don't include
Right.
that information, you
Yeah,
know?
definitely.
So there were
You
proponents.
know the history of the Chevron donation?
Mm.
6 acres, Chevron along the bayou, right across from.
Oh, right
Beaver
now
Creek.
that's happening. Yeah.
They gave it to, you know
Where
how they
little-
got it?
Little Woods is, yeah. Well, how did they get it?
This was the sawmill for the cypress that was in Cypress Island.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
All right.
Huh.
The lumber company bought it in about 1928 or 29, and it was a drought period, and they could never get the water high enough to cut the trees and take them out. They went bankrupt. And
Wow.
Chevron bought most of Cypress Island.
Mm-hmm.
And the sawmill, which I can remember,
Yeah.
right by Trapeze, you know, that sawmill was there.
Mm.
It eventually got torn down, but the sawmill was built. They were gonna float the logs out and bring them down to Bayou and cut them up right there.
Well, so Harold, since we're talking about we're talking about a little bit about the history of the Bayou Vermilion, both the geologic history and then the settlement history. But I mean, what would be your vision for the future of the Bayou?
One, I think the Corps has neglected it. It's of the 10,700 so homes that flooded in the 16 flood from Alexandria on down, over 8,000 was on the Vermilion.
Mhm.
So that has to be dealt with. You know, we made big changes, like the Red River dams.
Mm-hmm.
We built 6 dams on the Red River, 7 pools, and each pool raised the water 10 feet. And this pool 2 is at Alexandria, raised it 20 feet. So all of Rapides and western of Oils used to drain into the Red River. It can't.
Mhm.
So now it's all diverted to us,
Right.
to Bayou des Glades. And the Bayou des Glades watershed is 278 square miles, and that's all coming to us.
Wow.
So and it can't go down to Tesh, it's got a dam on the Tesh.
Mhm.
And it can't go down Lake Falls Point because you have dams there.
Yeah.
It only gets down Lake Falls Point totally out of control when the dam is overtopped. So the Vermilion is causing a lot of flood problems that shouldn't be.
Have you ever, I know you have, seen presentations by Dr. Ahmed Habib about the modeling that LSU, that UL can do at their civil engineering
Yeah, they did
department
one
with
of the
different
models,
things.
they didn't realize that there was a spoil bank that blocked the water from flowing into Cypress Island and flowing out.
Well, is it still, is that the one that's gone?
No, they just removed a small part of it.
Mm.
See, the Mississippi is roughly half a mile to three-quarter of a mile wide. When you look at the oxbow that we talked about, the north side is blocked by Lake Martin Road, the Ruth Canal, which has enormous spoil banks, and Lake Martin, which has a big spoil bank. So if the lake built in the bed of the deepest, in a curve of a steep curve of that old ancient river. And so of the 30,000 acres of wetlands that we should have usable for retention, half of it, no, about 40% is blocked off. And the south side, by the airport, the river was three-quarters of a mile wide. And the old swamps used to flow right into that three-quarter of a mile opening.
Mm-hmm.
I was there and grew up there before the levees, before they dredged the body. I watched them dredge it. In 1950, I was 11 years old. So the spoil bank is three-quarter of a mile. The only thing they left open is a little 50-foot opening on by Tortue. So that whole swamp should fill much quicker and should empty much quicker. So the whole thing is slow to fill, and as long as it doesn't fill, the water's rising. It's like filling a bucket. The quicker you can fill a bucket, the quicker you can shut off the flow.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, to restore a little bit of that, and it's the way, the way it'll work, it'll only help with a big flood, But you can look at the water right now. The water right now is at 9 feet. Flood stage is 10. It's been right at flood stage for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a real problem, because if we get a big rain 2 days from now, the water's still sky high.
Yeah.
And, because it doesn't drain. It fills Cypress Island, it takes forever to drain. The Nature Conservancy is real concerned because they're losing all their trees. And the fact that it stays flooded all the time, means that, the hardwoods go first. And the hardwoods are most important for feeding squirrels and
Mm-hmm.
wood ducks and everything else. So they're real concerned about, the fact that we keep the river high with this pumping system. It should be around 3, and we keep it at 5, which keeps the water in.
Up into
Cypress Island.
that. Uh-huh.
So, the Vermilion is really needs to be dredged, and it's a navigation waterway, and it should be dredged to navigation depth.
Actually,
There are 13 waterways that the Corps is responsible for. And I can guarantee you, if they let the intercoastal waterway go down to -3, and it should be -12, the Corps would be dredging there tomorrow. And, and so to lose navigation is a real economic negative, because with navigation is opportunity,
so the navigation goes up to.
It goes to General Mouton
Ambassador
Bridge.
Cap- Well,
goes
I've
to
never
General-
seen any commercial navigation.
Well,
I live on
you
the
have-
river too.
you
I've
have-
never seen that.
Let me
Harold.
tell you something. If the boat dealership there would love to do work on the big boats from Sycamore and of course and all, but they can't get there.
They can't get up there.
You can't get up there, because when you get by Rotary Point, it's only 3 foot deep, so you can't bring a big. They'd love to do engine repairs and all of that at their facility right at General Mouton. So, and the guy that runs it, Randy Redmond, he'd love to be able to bid on doing the repair work on those boats, but he can't.
Mm-hmm. So your vision would be, you want to see dredging.
You have to restore navigability, and the dredging would be a benefit not only for economic and navigation opportunities it brings with it, but for flood.
Wouldn't there be an issue with having to continue maintaining the dredging, though?
That should have been done all along.
Yeah.
And what happens to Abbeville?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, that's what I saw in the models that Dr. Habib did. If you remember, it was, you know, if you make that river deeper at Rotary Point,
The
you're
problem
just
for
shoving that slug
the
of water
problem for
down to
Abbeville
Vermilion
is
Parish.
our backward flow. The water flows backwards for 7 or 8 days, and it's piling up in Cypress Island. It's coming from, most of the water is not Lafayette's water. Lafayette's water wouldn't flood anybody. That's too small a watershed. You know, half of Lafayette's watershed is in the Mermentau, is not in the Tetchford Mead. And so, one of the things, as the northward flow could be changed, they could put a channel train weir at Goulet-Ile-de-Con and divert it. It's a big, powerful flow, it's 12,000 CFS, 12,800. The
That is
million is
big.
flowing at 2,000, so it way overwhelms it. And that causes a northward flow. But if you took that high velocity and diverted it straight south, the flood water would be in Vermilion Bay in 10 hours. Right now, it takes about 20 days for the same flood water that's going north and being, that hydro dam blocks all the water coming down. In the flood of 016, we had 42,000 surface acre feet went north. But that was a dam, and it's gone on at 10,000 CFS north. So all the water from coming down from Alexandria down could not pass and flooded everybody in Creation. And the
remember.
amount is, if local water is 40,000 surface acre feet, the amount that came south under the bridge was total 290,000 surface acre feet. And so, you know, 250,000 came from Alexandria of oils. You know, so that's the flood. It's not what was produced locally.
Have you been participating in some of the regional planning?
With the Louisiana Watershed Initiative? Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking
we're
about?
Yeah.
somewhat involved in that, yeah. Yeah, and, you know, I mean, a lot of money being, they're spending $70 million on a computer model. And I asked the engineer doing the model at one of the meetings, have you have current information on channel capacity of all the waterways that you're dealing with? No, we don't have that information. That you got Vermilion that should be 11 feet deep and it's 3 feet deep. You got the major outlet where the Charenton Canal hits Cote Blanche Bay. That's totally closed. That's the major outlet. It's forcing all the water down the intercoastal. The intercoastal has become a hydro dam, won't let water out. And because the water comes from the Wax Lake outlet and from the Lake Forest Point flood system, cannot go to the bay. That's the water's 3 inches deep. You can't go through there with a 15 horsepower motor. And so all these things, if you don't know that, if you don't know those channel depths, how can you model? What is your model telling you?
Yeah.
It's showing that, look, 10 years ago, that outlet is called the Jaws. You could take a drilling barge through it. Now, with my 16-foot flat with a 40 horsepower motor, I almost ran high and dry on it, right in the middle of the channel.
Wow.
And the crabbers have a little channel way off on the east side that they put a bunch of stakes and everybody uses the same, and it keeps it open for a little outboard, not for a tugboat, but it can't pass a flood. So there's a lot of issues out there that we seem to be, we're stuck on this concept of modeling, but for models to be valid, there has to be valid input
Right, you're
for you to
absolutely
get
right.
valid results.
Right,
You know?
absolutely.
You know, one of the things I think that's so unique about the Vermilion is the botany, the trees and all, so forth growing along it, and how we could improve that, you know.
So what I mean, you, as in planting planting more native species, or?
Well, you don't want to plant, one of the problems with vermilion, when they dredge it, it's a box cut.
Mhm.
And a box cut is it's a box that erodes,
Yeah,
and it doesn't support plant life.
no, because it calves.
doesn't have a
You know,
slope.
it doesn't
It just
have
calves
a
off, it
riparian
doesn't.
zone.
Right.
Right.
You know, we tried that, the legislature's changed, Texas and Florida and Alabama, they can't do box cuts. They have to be tapered like a
Yeah,
natural
gentle
beach.
sloping.
So you can have irises and cattails grow along the edge,
Mhm.
and
Your
when a
hardwood
wave
species on top.
hits a wall, it bounces back and hits the other wall. When it goes up the beach, gravity is destroying the force of the wave because it's
Mhm.
lifting,
Mhm.
and so we could have done a lot better job with that. You're not going to change it. That's just the way it is, But
It's
it
really-
is an issue for erosion, bank erosion.
So that's something that we are interested
Mm.
in. A couple years ago, we started right
2020.
before the
2019,
pandemic.
2020.
With our Reviving Resilient Landscapes initiative. In fact, we did one at your house.
Yeah.
But the idea was that you could plant a buffer, a riparian buffer along the waterways that would help with, kind of sheet flow, would help with ameliorating
Yeah,
stuff that's coming off the streets.
Yeah, improve stormwater,
It's true.
water quality,
and there's
create
Makes better
habitat.
Make better habitat.
We had
and
eight
you can grow
sites.
cypress from sprigs just like you look at all the willows near the Hilton.
Mm-hmm.
The Scouts
Oh,
planted those.
yeah, yeah.
And, and they were there to preserve the bank. And, if you don't like them, cut them down.
Well, one of the thing, I mean, the thing about the Vermilion is that so much of it is actually privately owned. So much of the riparian area is actually privately owned. And so really that's an initiative that we'd like to kind of keep alive, the idea of talking to people about doing exactly what you're saying, having, there's things you could plant, there's
Less hard
ways-
structures.
Yeah, there's ways you could manage your property so that you really could help with water quality, help with erosion
yeah.
issues.
You go along the Teche and you see people have put Belkas, well, they rot away in 10 to 20 years. And there's people that planted cypress. I mean, like 10 feet apart.
Mm-hmm.
And those knees and roots have formed a bulkhead that nature will never take away.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that program was really great because it allowed us to do some outreach in the general public about native plants specifically, but also about how we can improve our banks naturally.
Oh, yes,
And improve
yeah.
water quality through those native plants. Also because they're low maintenance, right?
Right.
Because they belong here.
I think, and people's idea of what a bank should look like is something.
Has changed over time,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's something that
They want a
requires
mowed
more
lawn
education.
right to the bulkhead.
Right,
That's right,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
I think
The
that-
rewilding concept
that-
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
so that's one of the things that Dr. Vidrine will be talking about. He has this kind of concept of rewilding, by which he means, planting, having native vegetation and native kind of habitat along riparian
Yep.
corridors. Both, Dr. Vidrine lives outside of Eunice, and so he's thinking about the farmers that are his neighbors, but we are thinking about in our urban area and suburban,
Rural.
suburban Lafayette,
Yeah.
like where you live.
Yeah, South Lafayette. Not on the river.
That those are things that, we really could promote and that would be a great thing. We've worked with Trees Acadiana on it. We'd like to continue. We have the Teche project. We've done some projects with them in the soil and water conservation districts. I mean, those are the kinds of things I think we can all get behind. And
Acadiana Native Plant Project.
Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting that.
And they provided all of the native plants, and we were able to give some away so that folks could go home and,
Yeah,
try the techniques that we were showing them in the workshops. So it was a very valuable experience, I feel like, for everyone, and hopefully, taught a few people. It wasn't just, oh, we're doing this demonstration project and, okay, forget about it now. No, this is what you can do in your own homes.
sure.
Right.
Your
Yeah,
own homes.
yeah.
And actually, the Tesh project has a quite nice little booklet that you can actually download off their site about how to landscape your riparian backyard. They've got drawings and
Amazing
plant
how,
lists and,
how
great
fast the
stuff.
cypress trees grow.
Yeah.
They really grow amazingly fast. And of course, irises are really easy in the lower
They
spots near the bayou,
Mhm.
put them in. They don't do well actually
It-
off the bank
Right,
because we have such a high, big difference between high and low water that
Right.
drowns them out.
but,
We,
something like pickerelweed,
pickerel weed, yeah.
we put that at that little park in,
Bulltown.
on Bayou Teche. And it, that's something that's
And we
gonna.
planted a bunch of irises in the bayou Teche, and they do real well because the Teche stays at the same level.
Mhm.
Because of the dam, it's at 10 feet, that's where it stays.
One thing I'd recommend, and Lawrence actually talked to me about this weekend, so BVPA adopted Beaver Park through the Embrace the Space initiative that LCG pushed forward a while ago, but so we've been doing a lot of beautification and improvement, and in particular near that dock, there was a lot of erosion occurring, and so we
Yeah.
engaged a local firm who is donating all of their time and plants, and they created basically a natural buffer along the river near that dock.
Big shout out to RES.
Yeah,
Thank you.
RES, thanks.
Wow.
But we did, we've been going back and maintaining, right? And this weekend, actually yesterday, with the Earth Day events that were so prolific, there were
Yeah, there
so
was a
many. They came out and helped us clean up the park, and we actually reinstalled some new native plants because we were having trouble picking the right ones for the right water depths. It was just staying saturated too frequently, and the plants weren't
Yeah.
doing as well.
That wouldn't survive.
So Lawrence was just saying, though, because we have some iris out there, but they aren't native. And so for listeners, folks watching,
No
The-
yellow iris.
the natives need to be planted, especially if you're going to plant them along the river, because they, it'll bring seed around, and we want to see those natives. So we talked about replacing them and making sure that we get natives there. So
Wow.
I think that's a good lesson for everyone.
Right, I think, well, you can find out what plants are native. USGS has a site called Louisiana Plants, and so you can actually access that. It's really easy.
We
and
have
you can-
a plant matrix on our
That's
website.
The trees that do very well in the bayou, the sycamore, the sweet gum, the willows, cypress,
Mhm.
there's a whole list of them that will do fantastic.
Mhm, mhm.
And being aware of the invasives too, right? And trying to remove those as quickly as you can. We have a
Right.
lot of Japanese privet that comes up
Right.
that really needs to be removed. So anyhow, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good example of, these native plants really can
So
provide what
Dr.
we need.
Vidrine, again, his program will be where and
Yep.
what time?
The South Regional Library in
Oh, yeah.
Lafayette, where that's at, just past
Yeah.
the mall. And it's on May 17th, right, from 5:30 till
Till
7. So it should be a great event. It'll be in the auditorium in there, free for folks to,
Right,
to
so
come
folks
check it
come
out.
And we really, because the ideas are so interesting and so topical, and I think it's the kind of thing we can discuss. We could
Oh,
have a
yeah.
community discussion about what's the best way to make that happen and how to engage homeowners or property
And
owners in that project.
I think also, like, again, with the whole theme of reconnecting, like reminding people of what how beautiful these landscapes actually are, and that they don't necessarily have to be perfectly manicured.
It shouldn't look like a golf
Right,
course.
sure,
It
yeah.
doesn't have to look like a
You know.
golf course.
No,
Yeah,
No.
I think folks have forgotten because everything is so perfectly manicured now. You know, you go to people's backyards and recognizing you just need plants to hold the soil, and that's going to be enough to prevent erosion.
And the
from happening.
wetlands plants, they do that.
Right, and they're filtering all of those, you know, pollutants that, you know, come from the
Coming off the
road.
David, is our phone hooked up? It doesn't look like it's lit up on our end.
Well, people are probably lined up trying to call us.
It's a very good topic.
Yeah. No, it's not on.
Oh, no.
So anyways,
Stand by.
there.
There
so-
we go.
yeah, Okay, maybe somebody might want to call in.
All right, call in.
Call in, yeah.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think something else we should probably talk about too that is currently happening. We sponsor a lot of really interesting outreach types of activities, particularly within the youth community,
Mhm.
student communities. And right now we're doing a rain barrel art contest with
Oh, wow, yes.
LUS
Yes.
and LCG and the ACA this year, which is really great,
And you
partnering
can-
with them.
yes. And you can vote.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
go vote.
right.
You can go to
Wow.
our website, yeah, BayouVermilionPreservation.org. You can vote
All
All
there,
spelled out.
yeah.
I mean, the test for Vermilion, the whole concept was provide fresh water, mainly down of Vermilion, to take care of the needs of rice farmers and crawfish
Exactly,
ponds.
exactly.
Irrigation, yeah.
And that has changed a lot. You know, much of Vermilion Parish, and you from Vermilion Parish,
I am,
has been converted to sugar cane,
yeah,
which they really don't use irrigation
much
water
water.
for at all. you know.
Right, not like how they used to use it, right?
Right.
we
yeah.
still have quite a bit of crawfish ponds and rice fields, but you're
Yeah.
right, there's a lot more sugar cane.
So, but yeah, well, and it's important that they have fresh water,
Yeah.
which is why they have all those structures down
And
there.
it goes to the bottom end of Vermilion, Intracoastal City, which is an economic disaster, so to speak. You know, I mean, the oil industry in the Gulf has changed, so that jumping off point of Vermilion has declined enormously. You know. I think
Yes,
there's
it
only
has.
about 20 people living still at Intracoastal
Yeah, the
City.
shrimp fleet still goes from there, I think, part of the shrimp
What's that?
fleet. I think part of the shrimp fleet still goes from Intercoastal
They
City.
do, they do, down freshwater body,
Yeah.
absolutely, yes. And that's another whole story, you know. I think the Vermilion, what flows out of Vermilion could use to be used with a few connections into the marsh that's eroding away to the west side, that you could divert Vermilion water and its sediment into that marsh system and help it, you know. There's a bunch of existing rice drainage canals could be plugged together and divert the flood in
Reuse.
that direction, you know.
Mhm.
Of course, Palmetto Park is on a Vermilion, and there's some interesting ideas floating around out there.
Oh, we
Yeah.
have a call.
You on the air? Can we help you?
Can you plug in the phone?
Yes, earlier you were talking about the fecal coliform threshold in the river. I'd just like to ask, is the river safe? Like, is it safe to eat the fish from the river, or is it safe to even swim there? Thank you.
So I do not work for DEQ, so I definitely don't want to speak for them.
ideas floating around out there.
But I would say, generally speaking, yes, it is safe.
I don't, there's certainly no advisories against eating the fish that comes from the river. I think
No,
you-
there's no,
I
wouldn't
think
be,
you do
that's
it all
not a
the time,
problem.
don't you, Harold?
You know, I mean, whatever comes from water, could be oysters, could be crabs, fish. You have to be careful if you handle them live or clean them and so forth, that you wash your hands thoroughly before you pick up a cracker or an apple, eat it. You know, that's just common precautions. Even if the fecal count was very low, it could be detrimental. And so as far as swimming, I don't know.
Well, it's not, it hasn't been
There's a
cleared for that.
variability there. During, you know, if it hadn't rained in 2 or 3 weeks, probably the water's okay. But you get a rain and you get a flushing of all the highway ditches that have very poor sewage, you know, treatment facilities, somebody's country home or no treatment facilities at all, and that washes down, so your fecal count spikes up at that time. And, the river has improved a lot, over the last few decades with much better sewer treatment. Country homes now are required to have sewer treatment, individual home sewer treatment units. They've improved their function. They were notorious for being very undependable and not working very well, but they've gradually made improvements on that. So, but just to say blanket is safe to swim, I don't know.
Like I say, it's not actually, DEQ doesn't have it as meeting that primary.
Criteria, yeah,
uh,
for swimming.
Primary contact standard. But I will say, are you familiar, Harold? I know you are, I don't know if you are, Roger, but there was a program that started as a pilot program at BVD, at the Bayou Vermilion District, where they were going out and
Oh, yeah.
and inspecting sewer treatment plants.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And then making, you would get something saying your
you could
your sewer
request
plant
their
doesn't
presence
work.
to inspect your home unit.
I think they go anyway. I
Yeah,
think they,
yeah.
but that's a way for people to find out, that's a way to know
Well-
whether you've got a problem or not. And many people, especially if you're moving, if you're moving from an urban area into the country, they might not even cross your mind that you need to do something to maintain that sewer
Yeah,
plant.
for sure.
Well, a 1985 study, when we were building the new Lafayette sewer plant, showed there were 28,000 unsewered homes in Lafayette Parish.
Wow.
And I would guess many of them are still that way.
So I think a couple of years ago, not this past year when we had the symposium, but the year before that,
Mhm.
we had a woman from
Oh, Lake Charles.
Lake Charles, and they took that program, which comes from, there's some federal funds involved in that, and they actually made that part of Calcasieu Parish government function, and so people are required, when they go out and inspect those sewer
To make
plants in
the
Calcasieu Parish,
improvements.
they have to
They
fix
have
it.
to improve.
And
Yeah.
I don't think Lafayette
It's a
has
real,
that
it's
right
a, it's
now.
a real
Yeah.
health issue,
Well,
Because
absolutely.
it feeds into the bay where we harvest crabs and shrimp. It feeds to the crawfish ponds. So literally, the issue lands back on our table.
Right, and that's something that, we should be talking to our our councilmen.
Yeah, if public health is not their number one priority, perhaps it should be.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, I think it should be
Yeah,
definitely.
right.
yeah.
Because this is fixable. Why do, a community in Lafayette spends a fortune on sewer treatment? And then you have some, subdivision that doesn't have sewer treatment? Or it has very inadequate
I
treatment.
think that happens a lot.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Those little teeny 1 or 2 street subdivisions, and they have a little teeny
They have a
sewer
little
treatment that
bitty
the
unit.
subdivision
yeah,
is supposed to maintain.
Offshore Red Fox unit that handles 50 people, and you hook up 270 homes on it, I think. Along with lack of sewerage is the lack of water for fire hydrants. And Lafayette has something like 60,000 homes with no fire protection,
Wow.
the parish.
Yeah.
That's, that's, people are paying dearly, besides being a safety issue, they're paying very high, fire insurance.
Insurance,
rates.
their insurance
Yeah,
rates,
yeah,
not only
right.
flood insurance, but now their fire insurance as
Now,
well.
think of what's happening with flood insurance, yeah. Flood insurance is going out the roof to the point where people can't hardly afford to buy a home. If you finance a home, the banks can insist that you have flood insurance,
Right.
Yeah.
and that's could become a very big ticket for everything south of I-10,
Right.
which includes nearly all of Lafayette.
Yeah,
kinda-
absolutely.
So we're getting on the tail end of our program, so Amber and Heather, thank you all so much in sharing your vision of how we can improve the Vermilion is such a treasure to our area, it's a historical treasure. It can be made better. You know, with little attention, we can make it better.
Well,
Improve
Harold
water
will come
quality.
back anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah, great. Improve water quality. The plantings along the Meyers, beautification is habitat for wildlife. It protects the banks from erosion. The native trees are best because they're going to survive the best. The sweet gum,
Virginia sweet spire.
sycamore
Sycamore.
grows so
Yeah.
fast. It's just amazing. I
And
cut
even-
one down
even
for a
in big
friend.
shoot,
I
like-
cut one down for a friend. It was about 10 inches, in diameter. And the tree was 6 years old. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, they grow so fast.
They grow so fast.
But also, there's some, just like, you could use buttonbush or,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, there's
some
other
shrubs,
kinds
small
of things you
shrubs.
could use. You could use grasses. There's just so much to think
Again,
about.
thank y'all for being here, and we share your vision and your optimism about making the Vermilion better, and we certainly support your efforts, so they're so important.
Thank you.